Hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space. And another couple Halloween cards for my 2023 Halloween series, because hopefully I can squeeze in a few more before the end of the month. We're getting really close to Halloween, but for those that may have missed any of it, I will have a link at the end of this video to my Halloween playlist for this year. And then if you search on my channel, I have like a decade's worth of Halloween playlists, tons of content among all my other videos. So for this video, these cards were inspired by a quilt. I get asked a lot, where I get my ideas from, inspiration, honestly all over the place. My brain never shuts off, but I see random things and it's like, take a screenshot, mull it over, see where it goes. A lot of times it's more just a jumping off point, and it goes completely different. These cards I kept very close to the inspiration, which was a quilt that I saw, a Halloween themed quilt, which was adorable. And it's actually a kit. And I was like, man, I need more time, energy, and space to actually get into real sewing, like on fabric. Someday, hopefully. But for now, it's not on my radar. I just use my little sewing machine there to sew on cards, which I've shown several times. And I did it, of course, on these ones because quilt themed. Although people that wouldn't know, like seeing my video, or unless they've seen the quilt, wouldn't get really where I was coming from. But still, it was fun. I used non-traditional colors. I also used pattern paper. And yeah, I sewed like I've been doing. You don't need a special machine, special thread, special anything. The only thing I like to mention when it comes to sewing on cardstock is same ideas like scissors, etc. is it can and will dull the needles you use in your sewing machine. Not a big deal. They're easy to replace. But yeah, I don't have any like special tips or techniques or anything. I literally just stick the cardstock in and get going. I'm starting to branch out a little bit though. I did a little bit of zigzag stitching on these cards, which as I get more comfortable with like fiddling, and changing things up, and it's like, it just gets more fun. I personally am just loving it. I used to sew on my cards years and years ago, and then I stopped doing it for many years, just kind of fell out of habit with it. And I'm really enjoying it again. It's really, really fun. So I will show the quilt that I was inspired by. I filmed it as I was filming everything else. And then I'll show you guys how I made these cards. And I pulled out a very oldie but goodie favorite that like makes its appearance in many of my Halloween videos, which is the Simon Says Stamp Friendly Ghosts Wafer die set. I love this set. It has been out, it's like 6 years now. And I love it. I absolutely love it. And I had just a moment where, like, perfection. I used the Simon Says Stamp Labyrinth 3D embossing folder, which the image on the packaging looks, I don't know what it is. It just looks weird to me. Like, I wasn't really sure about this embossing folder. And I was like, but when I was mentally planning out this card, I was like, that kind of looks like the stitching they do on quilts, like so when they do the freeform stitching, and it's all, I'm sure there's a proper word for it, but when they stitch when it's done and it's all like wavy and cool looking. And I was like, the embossing folder is perfect. So it all just started to come together, and yeah, I pulled out some pattern paper and actually used it instead of hoarding it. So yay me. And yeah, just keep watching and I will show you guys how I made these cards. So yeah, I saw this quilt from actually my sort of local little sewing shop. They had this kit with this quilt with all these little ghosts on it, and I was like, that is the cutest little thing ever. And then it just got me thinking, and I was like, oh, I could do pattern paper little ghosts and that embossing folder. Let's do it. So I went through my pattern paper stash, and I chose the Honeybee Stamps Summer Stems paper. It's shockingly still available, at least for now. It just had some colors, and patterns in it that I was like, this will work. This is gonna work. So I trimmed out a bunch. I was somewhat following, obviously, the color scheme of the quilt that I was inspired by. and also just kind of doing my own thing though. So I just trimmed a bunch of papers because I wasn't sure how many of these little ghosts I would be able to fit onto my card front. I was only going to use the medium ghost in this set because I knew my cards were going to be A2 sized because of the embossing folder. So I was like, okay, well, it's going to be the medium sized ghost. Not really sure how many I'll get out of it. We'll just trim a bunch of papers and see what happens. So like I always do, if I'm doing a bunch of die cutting, I get everything ready first, whether it's the pattern paper or if I'm using, scraps of cardstock, etc. I get all of that ready first, and then I get to die cutting. And for this, because I am die cutting a bajillion times with one wafer die, and it's small, I'm just using my this is the honeybee little die cutter, like from Honeybee Stamps. I do not have a link for this. I think it's only exclusive to their website. Hero Arts has a little manual die cutter as well. Tim Holtz has one. Just a little manual die cutter. I cannot even say how handy these little machines are. I never used to think. I kind of thought they were ridiculous, like way back, like years and years ago. And then I got one, and I use these little things all the time. My Empress Mini, the electric machine, that will also work. This is faster though, because the Empress Mini machine, those plates are, a little bit bigger, and, it only runs on one speed because you just press the button, and that's fine. But using a little manual machine like this, I can just zip through way more die cuts. And I also like my little mini manual machine because it's like, oh, I can just grab this, my get my cardstock ready, throw it all into a little, mesh bag, whatever, and then go sit in front of the TV, take it with me, do this in the vehicle, like wherever, and I can get her done. In this case, I didn't go anywhere. I just sat and watched, YouTube videos, Netflix, whatever. I get an audiobook on, music, that sort of a thing when I'm doing just repetitive die cutting like this. But yeah, a little mini die cut machine just makes it a million times faster than it would take like using, say, a normal size machine or just anything. So I die cut all my pattern paper. I was originally only going to make one card, and then I laid everything out like off camera onto a panel of like A2 size cardstock, and I was like, oh, I've got enough for two. So then I also die cut scraps of white cardstock, and I kept the little like mouth and eyes in them. I don't think I show it on screen, but behind all the white scraps, I just put washi tape to hold those in place. You could skip this and just adhere just little scraps of white cardstock behind their little faces. That would be the fastest option. I did the die cutting because I wanted that little extra bit of strength behind the pattern paper die cuts, because I was planning on popping these up with foam squares. Now, another idea, which I didn't really think about it until later, is not putting anything on the back of those little paper die cuts and adhering them to the gray cardstock and then embossing all of it at once. That actually might turn out really cool, but I didn't think of it till after I was done adhering all those die cuts, and I was not going to I don't have time. I don't have time, but it might turn out cool. So if someone wants to try it, just tag me in it and we'll see, because it might look really cool. But I didn't think of it. So I just embossed my cardstock as is. So I've got some dark gray cardstock. I laid out my flour sack cloth. It just helps keep me getting water from everything, And I just sprayed the cardstock with water. This just helps soften the fibers, so I get a really good embossed impression. And then with Simon's 3D embossing folders, I use my Spellbinders Platinum 6 machine with the original platform, and I have 2 metal shims. That is the perfect sandwich for me. They do have different sandwich options on their website with all their different folders, because they have a million folders. There's so many, so much fun. And they have different sandwich options listed for different machines, etc. So you just kind of got to figure out what works for you. But this is what works for me. So I mist the cardstock, put it in the folder, got my platform, the 2 metal shims, and I run it through my die cut machine, and it embosses it, and it just looks super cool. Yeah. And then I got thinking again, because, my brain just, like I said, doesn't stop. It would be cool to do, there are a bunch of like kind of quilted wafer die sets out there, and I was like, oh, to use those with pattern papers, assemble it and then emboss it with this embossing folder. So again, it would give it that like quilted look. That could be super cool. So many ideas. Anyway, so I ran those through and embossed them. I let them dry because I added water to them. So once they were dry, I trimmed these down a little bit. They were like somewhat A2 sized originally, and then you lose a little bit of the size when you run it through a 3D embossing folder like this. And then I trimmed them down to about like 4 inches by 5.25. And then after I trim these down, I am going to sew around the perimeter with my sewing machine. So regular thread, regular machine, regular needles, nothing special, nothing fancy. The only thing I did different this time was I would stop and then change the dial to do a little bit of zigzag stitching, which I'm going to have to like experiment with more until I get things the way I want it. But I was still happy with this. It didn't need to be perfect, and I was purposely doing like wavy stitching because one, that's way less intimidating than trying to stitch in a straight line. And two, it's a Halloween card. It doesn't need to be perfect. And even if it's not a Halloween card, no cards need to be perfect. Perfection's overrated. So I sewed around the perimeter. And just, again, I'm just enjoying the process. Oh, and the other thing I've been mentioning, if you are sewing on cardstock, you do need to kind of pay attention. You'll get a bit of buildup around the needle and the mechanism there with, like paper fibers. So I just use a very, very soft, fluffy brush, and I just I dust it, to remove those little paper, because they will build up over time. And while I don't necessarily intend to start sewing on fabric, I just want to take care of my machine, and not have a bunch of like build up like that. So that's just another thing to keep in mind if you want to sew on cardstock. So after I did that, I did another favorite that I have been showing a lot in videos lately because I love the look of it. I use my little Tim Holtz paper distressor thread cutter tool and roughed up the edges of both of these panels. I've shown other methods using like even a fingernail, which I don't recommend because it does put stress on your fingernails. And yeah, you don't want to wreck your nails. Or I've also used just the edges of my scissors. And the scissors, you can really rough up cardstock with that. I do like this tool. It's so much easier. And again, there's something satisfying about sort of wrecking cardstock. There really is. So I roughed up those edges because it just gives it that extra texture. You can also go and like really take it up another step depending on the type of card you're making, and like add like paint to the edges or the like gilding type fluids and those sorts of things to like emphasize that. I will probably do that, paint and etc. on the edges. Again, it just depends on what the look I'm going for. So roughed up those edges, laid out my little ghosties onto this panel. Once I was kind of happy with that layout, I adhered these with just some thin foam squares. And like I said earlier, you could adhere the pattern paper to the cardstock and then run it through the embossing folder, and then it would look more like actually quilted. I might have to try that down the road, maybe with different images, and yeah, we'll just see. You never know where my brain's going to take me, but it could be a neat look. So I just adhered all these though. Gives it a bit of dimension because you guys know I love dimension too. So pop these all up, and then I'm going to repeat the process on the second card panel. Didn't bother filming that because it was the exact same thing. I also left all the threads like hanging off. Again, it just depends on my mood. Sometimes I pull them, through and adhere them to the back and keep it a little clean. And then other times I leave them hanging out because I like that look too. So I left those, and then for my sentiments, I'm using another oldie but goodie set. This is just the CZ Design Reverse Halloween sentiment strips. And these sentiments that say, "You're my boo," I was like, that's kind of perfect, and it's cute. So I trimmed those down, and I trimmed them apart so it was not on one line because I didn't like how that was going to look on these. And then for these ones that the large ones that are going to go on the front of my card, I took my Memento Tuxedo black marker and I went around the edges, and this just coats the white core of this cardstock because the sentiment strips are just printed with like toner ink onto white cardstock. So all these reverse ones that are printed with the black, it just, again, it depends on my mood whether or not I do this, but edging them with a black marker just makes them look a little more finished. So I just go around the edge with those. I didn't bother with the 2 other sentiment strips that are going on the inside of the card because those are getting adhered over like the white card base, so it's not as obvious and it's fine. And then I had a few more little pattern paper ghosts that I had die cut, so I adhered those to the insides of my cards. And my card bases are top folding A2 white note cards. So all of my little ghosties, I'm just using craft tacky glue. That's in a Gina K precision tip bottle, so that just helps, you know, when adhering more little finicky things. So adhered all my little pattern paper ghosties to the inside of the cards, adhered the sentiment strips, and that's going to finish off the insides. So once those are adhered, I'm going to adhere the card fronts to the card bases. And again, I just used craft tacky glue to adhere these. So put that around the perimeter, got that into place, and then just put a few heavy things on top of it just to hold everything down while, you know, for a couple of minutes just to let the glue dry. And then, again, repeat the process on the second card. And then I'm going to adhere those little sentiment strips that I had separated and edged with the black marker. I'm going to use a couple little foam squares just to balance everything out, and then a little bit of craft tacky glue, and then pop those into place on these cards. So I just much preferred having these on 2 separate lines because I didn't want, I don't know, it just looked a little weird to me. So pop those into place, stuck it on with a little bit of glue. As always, a person could finish here, but I know I didn't use splatter. Shocking. But hey, it depends on my mood. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. With these, I just didn't want to, but I was going to add bling. Because of course I had bling. I had some honeybee bling, these gem stickers, which they're gem stickers. Love them. I hoard these just like I hoard their pattern paper. But I just peel them off with the edge of like the tip of my little die pick tool and just pick them up, stick them down. So I just kind of sprinkled them sort of randomly throughout the background just for that extra little bit of bling. And once I was kind of happy with that, these cards were complete. So as always, I will have a link below the video to my blog post. In the blog post, I'll have the photos, I'll have picture links to all the supplies I use, so you can check that out below if you're interested. I will also have the supply list linked directly below the video as well, so you just need to expand the description box if you want any of that info. And then of course I'll have links to my social medias, all that good stuff, that will be below as well. And then at the end of the video, I will link to my playlist like I mentioned at the beginning, so you can check that out if you've missed any of those videos. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, for thumbs upping and commenting. Subscribe if you haven't, I would love to have you. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.